The infield police chief says an armed robbery suspect ran inside the post office after shooting at officers. Officers called for backup and surrounded the building. Police say the suspect again shot at authorities. The police chief says officers finally went inside where they found the man dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. We will continue to follow this story and bring you more information as the investigation continues.
Well, tonight a 19-year-old hiker is recovering in the hospital after falling and hurting her back. Take a look. Fire crews having to airlift her from the Echo Canyon Trail on Camelback. We're told that she was almost to the top when she fell off. She was rushed to the hospital, but we're told she is in stable condition.
Well, new tonight, a South Bay couple had a close encounter with a large mountain lion. They say the big cat looked right at them, but never made a move. The encounter happened while they were hiking in Almaden Quicksilver Park in San Jose. They caught it all on their cell phone camera.
The smooth shots belie the tense situation as the full-grown cat stares them down from only about 15 yards away.
Wanted for the aggravated kidnapping of a female student at the high school where he taught. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation added 50-year-old Tad Cummins to their top 10 most wanted list. This is the girl he's allegedly with. He's charged with kidnapping this 15-year-old Elizabeth Thomas. Police believe Cummins is armed with 2 handguns, and they say he took out alone just a few days before disappearing.
The country has conducted one of its first ever civilian evacuation drills in Oga City, simulating a DPRK missile landing some 20 kilometers offshore into the Sea of Japan.
The Japanese government is trying to demonstrate that as North Korea's missile program grows more sophisticated, communities like this could become a target.
When it's all over, a government official thanks the volunteers and promises the Japanese armed forces will do all they can to shoot down North Korean missiles. But earlier this month, neither Japan nor its U.S. and South Korean allies could stop North Korea from successfully firing at least 4 missiles in a single day. 3 of them landed in the sea less than 200 nautical miles from this small coastal town. In this sleepy fishing port, locals are waking up to a growing threat. It's scary, says this fisherman, who's just hauled in freshly caught octopus. You never know what the North Koreans might do next. For some here, the missile exercise brings back painful memories. During World War II, we performed evacuation drills, 89-year-old Renosuke Ishigaki tells me. We put on gas masks and dug tunnels to hide in, and in the future, we might have to do that again. The principal of the main elementary school here says his students need to be prepared for a man-made disaster. Usually we perform drills for natural disasters, he says, but the potential threat from a missile is beyond imagination. In addition to its fresh air and seafood, this remote corner of Japan is famous for Namahage, a fairy tale monster that kept kids awake at night. But now there's a very real threat that may leave everyone here losing sleep.
The United States military plans to deploy Gray Eagle unmanned aircraft to Gunsan Air Base in South Korea. The deployment of likely 12 drones will enable the USFK to fly the aircraft along the DMZ to spy on North Korea, with the capability of switching controllers between the ground and other aircraft, as well as engage targets with Hellfire missiles. It marks a further escalation of U.S. weapons in the region experts find alarming.
I see the drone deployment as part of a message. Gray Eagle is a combat drone that can target North Korea's command. The message is that the Trump administration is intent on eliminating North Korea's regime, specifically Kim Jong-un. Under current circumstances on the Korean peninsula, I think that message is very dangerous.
Drones are controversial because their use has resulted in at least hundreds, if not thousands, of civilian casualties worldwide. South Koreans see the security dilemma with the deployment.
Having those weapons in South Korea shows other countries that we are able to make bigger attacks against them. Then those countries may react more strongly militarily. I don't feel safer. I feel nervous because South Korea now seems more exposed to security threats.
Last week, the U.S. unloaded elements of the controversial Advanced Anti-Ballistic Missile System THAAD, a deployment which has led to widespread protests.
Kim Jong-un's nuclear ambitions are fueling fast and furious developments, putting South Korea under mounting pressure. The U.S. is racing to deploy THAAD, a missile defense system on South Korean soil, insisting it's purely about protection from North Korea. U.S. President Donald Trump and South Korea's acting president say it must be installed as quickly as possible. China demands they stop, and Korea is stuck in the middle.
I think when I see people discuss about the THAAD deployment issue, people also worry about the escalating tension in the Korean peninsula and also in Asia.
South Korea is in the throes of a political crisis. Protesters demanded the impeachment of disgraced conservative President Park Geun-hye. Now, some want to push pause on THAAD. They want the next president to be elected in May to have the final say.
I read Trump's autobiography, The Art of the Deal. Art of the Deal is very impressive.
But Song Yong-gil, who represents a presidential frontrunner for the Democratic Party, says,
we can't decide our destiny, our problem. United States and President Trump should respect the democratic government, new government.
He says Seoul is too close to North Korea that THAAD can't protect it. The system is designed to intercept short and medium-range missiles, but the reach of its radar raises concern for countries in the region. Russia and China say the U.S. could use it to monitor their own missile launches. Now China appears to be pushing back. China says they haven't taken any official action against Korea, but South Korea says there are signs of retaliation for the installation that are hitting the country in the pocket, like cancellations of Chinese tours, leaving local businesses to feel the effect. The popular shops are a little emptier in this tourist neighborhood, she tells us. Shop owners are out in the streets trying to attract customers. Older Conservative Party voters, proud proponents of the U.S. alliance, support THAAD. Liberals pushing for more open dialogue with North Korea fear it could keep everyone away from the negotiating table. Six-party talks, which involved Russia and China, broke down in 2009.
North Korea has developed their nuclear power during the period when Six Party is not working properly. And we actually gave them an opportunity while we're not actually talking to them. They used that moment to develop their nuclear weapons.
Kim Jong-un is once again upping threats, promising this year to test an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead to the U.S.
Now, all North Korean banks have reportedly been barred from a global financial transaction network which connects international banking institutions. Reuters reports that SWIFT has cut off the 4 remaining North Korean banks still linked to its system in the face of the regime's growing military threats. Despite saying the banks had failed to meet its operating criteria, SWIFT did not elaborate on their exact shortcomings. A week earlier, Belgian authorities announced that they were banning SWIFT from providing services to North Korean banks, which are under UN sanctions.
The U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says efforts over the past 2 decades to restrain North Korea's weapon programs have failed.
We noted that efforts made over the last 20 years have so far not succeeded in curbing the threat posed by North Korea's illegal weapons programs. Because China's stated policy is denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, we renewed our determination to work together to convince the North Korean government to choose a better path and a different future for its people.
At a joint conference with his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, Tillerson called for a reduction of tensions in the Korean Peninsula. He also highlighted the importance of safeguarding stability and security in Northeast Asia and the Asia-Pacific region. Wang, for his part, called for diplomatic means to peacefully address the North Korean issue. He also said that China was ready to walk on the U.S. side with the spirit of no confrontation, no conflict, and mutual respect to address differences. Tillerson is also scheduled to meet with the Chinese President Xi Jinping on Sunday.
As soon as they're set. Okay, so are we pretty much done with?
Does this bring home the real threat, the nature of our alliance?
Then the second thing is distinguish.
The Secretary's.
Under the gaze of North Korean border guards, Rex Tillerson stands close to the line that separates North and South Korea. The so-called truce village is a symbol of the uneasy peace that has existed between the two sides since the end of the Korean War. The question dominating this visit is if and how those hostilities could resume. Increased ballistic missile testing by North Korea has raised the prospect of the development of a long-range missile that could reach the U.S. mainland. Tillerson gave a clear indication the U.S. could feel justified in using force to stop the North Korean threat.
If they elevate the threat of their weapons program to a level that we believe requires action, that option is on the table.
Add to the North Korean missile threat the South Korean political crisis. Tillerson's visit comes as South Korea prepares to elect a new president following the impeachment of Park Geun-hye. The acting president, a conservative, could be replaced by a liberal.
So it is very possible that we will have a liberal in office after quite a number, almost 10 years of conservative government in Seoul. And that will certainly change the equation because the liberals have a very different policy when it comes to North Korea.
The Liberals have said they want to take a softer line with North Korea, starting a dialogue. Part of Tillerson's mission has been to strengthen support from Japan and South Korea for whatever tough new strategy the US adopts. But he could find after the coming presidential election that South Korea is the weak link in that alliance. Amid the deepening uncertainty, one city in Japan has carried out the first drill to protect people from missile attack. Oga is one of the closest cities to where North Korean test missiles have been dropping into the Sea of Japan.
The South Korean military has said that its Navy will conduct joint military exercises with the United States in waters around the Korean Peninsula starting Sunday. In addition to the USS Carl Vinson supercarrier, a South Korean Aegis destroyer, more than 60 surface vessels, submarines, patrol aircraft, and helicopters are expected to participate in the maneuvers. The full Eagle drill is expected to run until March 25th.
North Korea has announced the successful testing of its newly developed rocket engine. The country's leader Kim Jong-un has hailed the ground test as the rebirth of North Korea's rocket industry. Kim personally oversaw the preparations and ordered the launch. North Korea's official media said that the engine will give Pyongyang world-class capabilities to launch satellites into orbit. North Korea has been accused of using its space program as a cover to test its long-range missiles.
Why would they try and attack
a country that is an ally of the United States, particularly why would they wish to use nuclear weapons against any other country when it would result in the utter destruction of North Korea? There's absolutely no rational reason for them to do so. But as I said before, the existence of the North Korean leadership making these threats against the United States, against Japan, against South Korea and so on, gives the Americans the perfect excuse to station their troops in South Korea, to have their missile system there, to have their military conducting exercises on the North Korean border and in the Korean Sea alongside Korea, and to maintain the fiction that the boundary, the maritime boundary, goes up the coast of North Korea, which is contrary to all precepts of international law. This is something the Americans have persisted in since 1953. If they were serious about having negotiations with North Korea, they'd sit down around a table with them and talk. They have refused to do so. They refused to have the North Koreans visit Washington. They've refused to visit Pyongyang themselves. They've refused to use the Chinese, who would be their best conduit for discussions with the North Korean. They have no interest whatsoever in a peaceful settlement of the Korean dispute. It suits their geopolitical purposes very well indeed to maintain the hostility and the rhetoric and, of course, maintain their forces there.
And what kind of a response are you expecting to see from North Korea? Usually sanctions rhetoric and joint military drills with South Korea are responded with missile tests.
Yes, this is posturing by both sides. Those missile tests that the North Koreans conduct are fired into the open ocean. They've never been aimed at any single country. They've never landed in any single country. And there's absolutely no reason to believe they ever will. Because, as I said, the retaliation against North Korea would be massive and devastating. And they're not, whatever else they are, they're not stupid.
On Friday, the Philippines claimed it would strengthen military facilities on islands and shoals in the disputed South China Sea and announced initial plans to construct a new port and pave an existing rough airstrip. Defense Minister Delfin Lorenzana has been scheduled to inspect an outpost on Thitu, one of the disputed Spratly Islands. However, his trip was cancelled due to safety issues. Lorenzana then spent the day at a military base where he unveiled the development plans. The Philippines have squabbled with China for years over the South China Sea, but relations have appeared to improve under President Rodrigo Duterte, who is scheduled to meet with Chinese Vice Premier Wang Yang in Davao City on Friday.
The visit comes amidst renewed tensions over maritime issues, as the Philippines Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana expressed concern over sightings of Chinese research vessels in waters off the Philippines' Pacific coast. But the issue has been downplayed both by Duterte and the Chinese side.
I wish to reiterate that China fully respects the Philippines' rights over the continental shelf in the Benham Rise, and China has no intention of challenging those rights.
It's no secret that ties between China and the Philippines have been plagued by maritime disputes, especially during the presidency of Rodrigo Duterte's predecessor, Benigno Aquino. Now those issues have not gone away, but both sides seem bent now on setting those aside and on developing the economic aspect of their relationship. Indeed, while territorial issues were discussed, all eyes are on multi-billion-dollar trade and investment deals forged between China and the Philippines.
The Huaycoloro, one of Lima's main rivers and one of dozens, overflowed in Peru's coast. The strong current swiped through areas of Huachipa, 15 kilometers east of Lima, leaving devastation in its course. Esther Yactarimay lives by the river. She says the landslide and flooding took all families in the area by surprise.
We felt as if it was an earthquake. We went out and saw the mud coming. As you can see, everything has been lost.
The mud and water flooded streets and homes. Thousands were left without electricity and water. People are still desperate.
The mud didn't reach our homes, but we can't leave. Exits have been cut off. We are isolated here, without water. How are we going to cook?
The government says more than half of the country is in state of emergency. 70,000 people have lost their homes and 500,000 have been affected. Roads are destroyed, bridges collapsed and crops lost.
This is a path of landslides. The government is asking people to stay away from riverbanks like this, but people need to cross to look for food and water.
On Saturday, people queued up as the government began distributing basic food and water. Private citizens started support networks to deliver clothes and food. The government set up tents for some of those who lost their homes. Most of the flood victims are poor. The Minister of Culture says he hasn't seen this scale of the disaster in more than 30 years.
The situation is far more overwhelming than we could have imagined, and it's not over yet. It's very difficult, but we're getting better at responding.
Water has been cut off in several districts of Lima, a city of more than 9 million. The government is still assessing the level of disruption. Weather forecasts indicate there will be rain for another month as the worst downpours in decades continue to leave the country at a standstill.
The diggers came without warning, making light work of the brittle houses as the community looked on. This had been a slum like no other, built on a lagoon in the heart of Nigeria's biggest city, Lagos. A bustling fishing settlement, home to 300,000 people, many of them migrants. Elizabeth Toson is one of many whose homes were crushed. Her 3 children picked through the debris, trying to salvage what's left of their school books. The security forces came the night before, she said, with bulldozers and tear gas. When the community resisted, they started shooting and crushing their homes. The clearance happened in spite of a court ruling made in January, ordering the government to consult residents before evicting them. An aid group that's helping the community with its legal battle says the government's actions are illegal.
The court has actually found that the demolition that took place here and the types of demolitions that have been taking place, rendering people homeless without alternative, constitutes cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment in violation of the Constitution.
This is the second time in 5 months that houses have been demolished here. In December, around 30,000 people were forced to leave. 11 people were reportedly killed in the process, but many still returned to rebuild their homes. In this city of 23 million people, land is a precious commodity. These waterfront plots, a prime site for developers.
And joining us for more on the story out of Seattle is Mr. Richard Silverstein, journalist and political commentator. Hello, Mr. Silverstein. Thanks for joining us on the program. Now, tell me, please, how adding $54 billion to an already $600 to $800 billion military budget will make America any safer?
Well, it actually might do the opposite. It might promote U.S. Intervention abroad more than the ones that we're already engaged in, and it definitely will point to the decline of U.S. diplomacy. Our country has a long history of many centuries of working internationally to try to ease tension and conflict. We had a president who was given a Nobel Prize for resolving the Russo-Japanese War in 1905. This really may mark the death knell of American diplomacy. As you mentioned, the State Department is going to see a big cut in its funding, and all of the other important agencies that most liberal Americans find valuable, like the Environmental Protection Agency and related ones, the Arts and Humanities Foundation, munitions endowments will also be eliminated totally under this budget. What it means is Donald Trump is putting all of his eggs into a basket of military power. And this is a candidate who, during the election, promised that he would stop U.S. intervention, that he did not support U.S. intervention abroad. But he's giving a 10% increase, which is huge in the context of the American budget, to the military. And this is very alarming. I am hoping that Congress will put the brakes on this. It does have the power to negotiate the budget, and I'm hoping that the increase will be vastly decreased.
And isn't that not a contradiction in and of itself to add $54 billion to a military that you're going to try to keep restrained?
Yes, I think that what it means, when you have a military, you want to use it. So it's much more likely when you give generals lots of new armaments and advanced weapon systems that they're going to want to use them, not just test them, but they'll want to actually use them in field conditions. So we already use some of our advanced weapons and give them to Israel for them to use against the Arab frontline states and Palestinians. So I foresee major U.S. weapons sales abroad, which will exacerbate tensions and conflict throughout the world. And I foresee another war on the horizon, perhaps a war in the Middle East, perhaps a war somewhere else. But I think this bodes ill for U.S. foreign policy over the next 4 years.
And last but not least, what about the State Department and the EPA? I mean, keeping America safe, the EPA does quite a significant job of, elaborate job, I should say, of getting out there and protecting the environment, protecting people's, drinking water, running water, whatever is, attached to the environment. Isn't that part of keeping America safe?
I think so, and I foresee a decline in the quality of our air and our water, and Trump's EPA administrator doesn't even believe in climate change, which is destroying our environment gradually. And I think that this really marks a decline in the quality of life in the United States, and it's really, really unfortunate development.
The Enfield police chief says an armed robbery suspect ran inside the post office after shooting at officers. Officers called for backup and surrounded the building. Police say the suspect again shot at authorities. The police chief says officers finally went inside, where they found the man dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. We will continue to follow this story and bring you more information as the investigation continues.
Well, tonight a 19-year-old hiker is recovering in the hospital after falling and hurting her back. Take a look. Fire crews having to airlift her from the Echo Canyon Trail on Camelback. We're told that she was almost to the top when she fell off. She was rushed to the hospital, but we're told she is in stable condition.
Well, new tonight, a South Bay couple had a close encounter with a large mountain lion. They say the big cat looked right at them, but never made a move. The encounter happened while they were hiking in Almaden Quicksilver Park in San Jose. They caught it all on their cell phone camera.
The smooth shots belie the tense situation as the full-grown cat stares them down from only about 15 yards away.
Wanted for the aggravated kidnapping of a female student.
The Japanese government is trying to demonstrate that as North Korea's missile program grows more sophisticated, communities like this could become a target.
When it's all over, a government official thanks the volunteers and promises the Japanese armed forces will do all they can to shoot down North Korean missiles. But earlier this month, neither Japan nor its U.S. and South Korean allies could stop North Korea from successfully firing at least 4 missiles in a single day. 3 of them landed in the sea less than 200 nautical miles from this small coastal town.
The high school where he taught. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation added 50-year-old Tad Cummins to their top 10 most wanted list. This is the girl he's allegedly with. He's charged with kidnapping this 15-year-old Elizabeth Thomas. Police believe Cummins is armed with 2 handguns, and they say he took out alone just a few days before disappearing.
The country has conducted one of its first ever civilian evacuation drills in Oga City, simulating a DPRK missile landing some 20 kilometers offshore into the Sea of Japan.
Threat that may leave everyone here losing sleep.
The United States military plans to deploy.
In this sleepy fishing port, locals are waking up to a growing threat. It's scary, says this fisherman, who's just hauled in freshly caught octopus. You never know what the North Koreans might do next. For some here, the missile exercise brings back painful memories. During World War II, we performed evacuation drills, 89-year-old Renosuke Ishigaki tells me. We put on gas masks and dug tunnels to hide in, and in the future, we might have to do that again. The principal of the main elementary school here says his students need to be prepared for a man-made disaster. Usually we perform drills for natural disasters, he says, but the potential threat from a missile is beyond imagination. In addition to its fresh air and seafood, this remote corner of Japan is famous for namahage, a fairy tale monster that kept kids awake at night. But now there's a very real